Hello crafty friends, I'm Lien from Studio Kato and I'm so glad you're joining me again today. And today I am using some products from Crafty Meraki and stamps by Clearly Besotted to make a Halloween card. Now I started off by die cutting and I die cut this panel twice. I first die cut the stitched detail into it with the Dancing Feathers die by Crafty Meraki. And then I die cut the frame and the inserts, which is the 3-room studio die, also by Crafty Meraki. And to finish off my background, I am using some distress oxide inks to add color to the 3 windows. I do this first because with ink blending, I never really know where my color will end, even if I have a plan beforehand. So by doing it first, I know exactly where my colors are in my background, and I can make sure to color my critters in a way that they stand out from the colors in the background. Because usually with cards like these, I have a pretty good idea of where I want my images to be. Now this is the bottom panel and I already know that the critter I want to place on it is a fox. I won't color this fox orange because that panel is going to be orange and the critter wouldn't stand out if I also colored the critter orange. So I just made the fox a little bit darker. Now usually with Halloween blends you try to go from orange to purple, or that seems to be the most popular one anyway. But I never get a nice blend between orange and purple, which makes sense because they're not meant to blend together. So I just use some abandoned coral in between, and that is a really nice soft red that blends perfectly with purple, but also blends perfectly with orange. So getting that mid-tone in between really helps with my blending. And with my background all done, I can move on to stamping my images. I am using the Clearly Besotted Simply Spellbound stamp set, and I'm stamping a bunch of the images onto Clairefontaine DCP 250 GSM cardstock in Memento Tuxedo black ink. And this ink and paper are perfect for alcohol marker coloring, which I will be doing, even though it's not really my expertise. Now I'm stamping one image onto vellum with Versamark ink. It's the smoke that comes up from the cauldron. And I stamped that in Versamark ink and I will emboss it in white wow embossing powder, bright white wow embossing powder. And that will give me a nice smoky effect. I'm doing all my stamping at once here. On the panel there's a space for a sentiment, so I used an sentiment from My Favorite Things stamp set that's since been discontinued, but it's a gorgeous sentiment anyway. And I stamped it in Versafine Onyx Black and embossed it with Wow Clear Gloss Superfine embossing powder. And with all my stamping done, I can move on to coloring. Now, as I said, I'm not an expert with alcohol markers, so I'm not going to pretend to know my stuff here. I just do what feels right. The one thing I want to do with these images is give them lots of contrast. So I start out with a really dark marker. This one was a little bit too dark because I can't get it to blend out nicely. And then I try to blend that out as light as possible. And I also don't have the best marker collection, but I made do. Now, because I don't have as many markers as I would like, it might be a little bit more difficult to get the contrast that I want. To help that along a little bit, I do my blending in stages. I always go from darkest to lightest, but I do it in steps. So I do my darkest shade first, then my mid-tone, then go back to my darkest shade to intensify it. That gives me more contrast, and then do my lightest shade. Now to get a smooth blend, I often do multiple layers of this, usually 2, sometimes 3, depends on how hard the blend is, but it usually works out with this paper. I know you can't do this on all papers, and I know the paper I'm using, the Clairefontaine DCP paper, isn't available in the US or is hard to get. So you can also look into Transotype Perfect Coloring Paper. I hear that's great for alcohol markers. I haven't tried it myself, but one of the best features of it is that you can layer a bunch of markers on top of each other. Now I do want to talk a little bit about the owls that I just colored. They're really simple to color, but I used some browns and some grays together to get the perfect owl color. So you don't have to stay in the same color family when you're doing your blending. I only did my darkest shade in a brown. It was a quite muted brown, so it goes well with the grays. And then I used some grays to blend it out to a lighter shade. For the cauldron, I'm really disappointed to say I was super proud of the bubbles, and when I rewatched the footage while editing, I realized that I colored the bubbles completely off screen. And I was so proud of how I colored them. So yeah, can show that to you. But basically what I did is I extended the lines of the bubbles to make more intense shades there. The image itself doesn't really show bubbles, it just shows some curves on top of the cauldron. So I just extended those lines, made circles, and then blended on my markers. I'm using the same greens throughout my coloring process, so all the images will look like they belong together. And the only other punchy color I will use is some purple, and I will add that to the rim around this fox's head and also on the book. Now I am using the Déco Time Twinmarkers, and as with most lower quality markers, you don't really get perfect color gradients, and the caps and the numbers on the caps don't really make sense for blending. So it's really tricky to find blends that you like. Just experiment. I always have a bit of paper off to the side to test my blends on before I go to color. I should probably just make a swatch book at this point, but I'm too lazy to do that. So I just do some swatches every time before I start coloring. And now that they're all colored in, I can fussy cut them out and assemble my card. I added dimension to the frame by adding 2 more die cuts behind it, layering them together with liquid adhesive. I used the Barely Art Precision Craft glue, and then I can add that glue in the windows as well and insert my ink blended panels. I'm propping all of my images up with foam tape, but I'm using some liquid adhesive, again that Barely Art Precision Craft glue, to add the smoke there because it's vellum. And then it's time to arrange all of these little gems. These are by Crafty Meraki. They're the purple dream gems. They look a little bit blue in the pictures, but they shift between blue and purple. They're really, really gorgeous. I'll adhere them with that Barely Art Precision Craft glue again, and you might have noticed that I did add some color to that smoke as well, and I really like how that turned out too. I just did that with my alcohol markers. Now for my envelope, I'm trying something a little different. I am making an envelope out of vellum. I thought that would give a nice spooky effect, and I had some purple vellum that would work perfectly for this card. I'm just making it with the We Are Memory Keepers 123 punch board, trimming off the excess on both the top and bottom flaps. And I will also leave the calculator I use for my punch board in the description below, and that will help you make any size envelope that you need. Now the adhesive does show through the envelope, but honestly, nobody expects you to make an envelope that just is magically adhered together, so it's absolutely fine if that adhesive shows a little bit. I'm stamping on the cauldron and the smoke in Versamark ink and embossing that with Wow Bright White Superfine embossing powder, just to add a little something extra to my envelope. And here you can see the card inside the envelope. I really like that effect. If you don't want your recipient to see your card, but you like the idea of a vellum envelope, you can just put a piece of paper in front of your card before you put it in. I really like how this card and envelope turned out. The colors are gorgeous, and I really liked getting out my markers again, even though I'm not super comfortable using them yet, even after 2 years. I hope you liked the card as well as the video. If you did, make sure to leave a thumbs up on this video and leave your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to read them. I'd also love to know if you make and send Halloween cards. I only started making them really because I'm part of some design teams now, and people are coming out with gorgeous Halloween stamps. So that's how I started. And you can also hit that bell button if you want to get notifications every time I post a new video. And if you'd rather not wait for a new video, you can head over to my channel page, just click on my username below the video, and that will lead you to some playlists that I made. I hope you like those as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.